Vyas, Senior Advisor CII, President-elect World Design Organization, to give a brief background of CII design initiatives and set the context.
Very good morning. Secretary METI, Mr. Krishnan, Joint Secretary Culture, Ms. Mugdha Sinha, and the design movement for the last 23 years, which is headed by Dr. Udyant Malhotra. Lot has happened during his time and his connectivity. He was the chairman of CII Innovation and Design Committee. Ms. Mugdha Sinha has really set the agenda. There is difficult to articulate what she has articulated, but I feel that the design which she mentioned about Charles and Ray Eames India report, which was published in 1958, and based on that report, NID was formed in 1961. And Lota metaphor, which was mentioned, I think the title of the conference, from handicrafts to aircrafts, really bring in a very strong, where the design is based on the culture, the Lota, the way it has evolved over the time. There is no one designer who has created the Lota. Each generation after generation, where the technology was coming in, people started using metallurgy, technology and need, and modified the Lota. And that is the way that NID was established, that don't build totally a new thing, but build the new knowledge based on what traditional knowledge is there and take it to the next level. And I think there is a lot to learn about it. We did talk about design policy. It's important because the design education started in the second industrial revolution, where the mass production was the order of the day, user-friendly, easy to use, easy to make, but it is based on the linear economy, take, make, use and throw. And I think that aspect, we all designers who have used, and the corporate world looked into the whole economic setup is more on consumption and consumer. I think that is now becoming a questionable when we talk about sustainable development goals. And this linear economy is between the consumption and consumer, has to have redefinition of design education, redefinition of design services, redefinition of the policy framework which we are looking into. And I think this is the time where we need to really move into the transformation of the entire activity which we are doing to go to the next level. The national competitiveness of many countries have really focused on design to see that how we can add values, and values with a purpose. Because when we are talking about values, obviously it is not just economic value which we are looking into, because we have to look into the planet, we have to look into profit, we have to look into people, and we have to look into purpose. So I think those some of the things which we have to really work towards, and this is the best gathering. 2007, as Mugdha mentioned, that government announced the National Design Policy. That National Design Policy is totally silent on the digital infrastructure, digital inclusion in the design, and which is in the Industry 4.0 is the major thing. We all are talking about artificial intelligence and design, and the Secretary's presence really makes so much of impact on the future of design, where we are going to really head in this Industry 4.0. Japan also termed the Society 5.0. Society 5.0 is talking about that there are a lot of issues such as ethical issues, which one has to look into, because technology is enabler. It is not the driver. And when we see, sometimes we get carried away with the technological development, the way it is going fast. Designers can really use it and create something which is good or bad. Afterwards it will tell. But I think this is the system thinking one is really looking into, that when technology is moving so fast, in the coming years, how we make a very responsible use of the technology for the benefit of society. Mugdha ji also talk about democratization of the whole thing, where the participatory activities. I think the community's involvement becomes very important. Taiwan and Japan started including all creative work together, coming together and solving the social problem. And that's why I think the countries like Japan, Taiwan, UK, Korea have really taken lead, because they are adding value, not only the economic, but also, as I mentioned, the social, sustainable, and making it more, I would not use term user, because when we started talking about consumer, it moved to the user, user to human, and now Don Norman started talking about humanity. I think somewhere we have to really shift from consumer to humanity, where we see that eventually the generation after generation who will be using these services, they are more sustainable and more suitable in all aspects which we look into it. The education part becomes very important, and I think there is a discussion afterwards on the education that we have to redefine the design education in today's complex challenges which world is facing. World is facing on environmental challenges, world is facing on the migration challenges, world is facing so many different kind of things. So it is not a product, it is not egocentric, fulfilling your own need for the branded product, but how we create something which is more systematic and which is more, what you call, trying to address these complex problems which we are facing. It is possible with the design thinking, with multidisciplinary. Again, Mugdhaji mentioned about technology, design, social science, management, all need to come together and take it forward to do that. The explosion of design education which is happening in this country, and we just saw 1,500 design schools have come up. There was only 2 earlier, IIT Mumbai and NID. And suddenly you see that 1,500 design schools are there. Technology has been taken care by AICTE or UGC, and there is no framework of assessing the quality education in design. And I think this is a big challenge for us to really look into, that we cannot really put the design education which has evolved over the years in National Institute of Design and making it more contextual. What is the parameter by which you can see that how this quality evaluation which we can take it to the next level. So I am not going to take much time, but I think we live in a complex world. Complex problems are there, and design strategy which is more multidisciplinary, more what you call collaborative, not egocentric but more ecocentric, and inclusive, and because we say that suppose you're financially well off, you can get whatever you want to get. But the needy and marginalized population, marginalized people, and if you talk about minority, which will include the aging population, which will include the less able people, all these areas, they need help. They need help from our community, who can really think systemically. And for the inclusive development, if we do inclusive development, if we try with our effort to make life comfortable, create cities which are livable, reduce the pollution in the city, try and work out the public facilities, public infrastructure, much better way. I think this is the agenda which we need to set for the future to make design more inclusive and sustainable. I would again like to thank Secretary Mehti, Mr. Krishnan, and Joint Secretary Ms. Sinha for taking out time. And I think from culture to technology, the heading which we have of our crafts to spacecraft, handicrafts to spacecraft, I think the creative culture industry in this country is very big. We have a biggest craft heritage, and I always, with Mr. Udyan Malhotra, I tell that the people who are working with ivory, there's such a fine millimeters or micromillimeters what they were doing it. Now ivory is banned. Can we use that human resource for a very high-tech, very high technology-centric chip making and other thing, because they are the highest skill resources which we have. We can really look into that skill India, where the crafts people with a very fine skill, very fine understanding of material which they have, if we can really bring into this, the collaboration with the designer, we can really create marvels in the world. Thank you once again, and we'll be interacting because there is a very limited time, so we'll talk afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Vyas. Ladies and gentlemen, I now have the pleasure and honor to invite Shri S. Krishnan, Secretary, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India, for his address, please.
Good morning to all of you. Dr. Pradyumna Vyas, Mr. Udyant Malhotra, Ms. Mugdha Sinha. You know, when Dr. Pradyumna Vyas invited me to this event, I first asked him saying, why should I be there? I mean, how am I even connected? And I was also reluctant because sometimes it becomes, December in Delhi is the month of conferences and seminars, and I think this is the third CII event I'm attending in the last 1 week, apart from many other events. But because it was Dr. Pradyumna Vyas and because of our older association, there was no way I could say no to him, and I turned up primarily because he had requested me to come. And then I was in for very pleasant surprises that I would share the stage with Mugdha, who joined the civil service and was in training when I was a faculty member in the National Academy of Administration, so I've known her since her early days in service, and Mr. Udyant Malhotra, who's been associated with establishing aerospace industry, even in Tamil Nadu, where I was previously. So in that sense, I think, if not by design, but certainly by accident, this has been a very pleasant way to get back together with old friends and meet them all over again. Which brings me to this whole point of why I think design has become increasingly important in the range of areas that we are looking at today, in where India stands as an economy, in what India is trying to do at a larger scale, and what it needs to do for its own people. I mean, I think we need to look at it from both perspectives. I was very interested to see the two reports which had been brought out, and I was quickly glancing through the report, and I found that, there are various kinds of design, fine arts and fashion and leather and automobile and so on. But I didn't find anything which said what is electronic product design. There is, of course, the UI UX experience of, probably, and augmented reality, virtual reality kind of related elements also, which is more of the information technology part, but of electronic product design, I didn't see specific courses, though I do understand that there are a couple of courses offered in Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore and in IIT Guwahati. But maybe that is something that we need in this country. The reason I say that is, as a person who's in the electronics industry, and all of us use these mobile phones. For instance, if I showed you my Apple phone, probably in the US it costs $1,000, and where it costs $1,000, and many of the people who belong to that value chain of manufacture come to us and say, our customer is very, very difficult to deal with, and our margins are wafer thin, are really razor thin. So you have to sort of support us if you want the jobs. So both the government of India and many state governments have actually handed out fairly large concessions to enable the eco chain, the ecosystem, and the manufacturing ecosystem of Apple to come into India. So today we probably have about, we are aiming that about 20 to 25% at least of, say, Apple iPhones are made in India at some point or the other. And if you look at the value addition which takes place in India, it is probably currently at about 12 to 15%, and hopefully will go up to about 30-35% in due course as more and more components get made. But if you look at how that value addition is shared, probably with all the people down the line, of that $1,000, $250 is what gets paid to all the vendors up and down the line, and bulk of it gets retained by the guys who actually designed it sitting in Cupertino, right? I mean, this is what design adds to the value of a product, particularly in the electronic space. When we realize the importance of this, I think it's important in 2 or 3 ways. I mean, I'm not for a moment scoffing at or questioning why we need to encourage the value chain to come into India. The answer is very simple, it's jobs. And even at 12 to 15% of the value addition taking place in India, it's thousands and thousands of jobs. The largest factories today in India are manufacturing cell phones, and they employ 50,000 people and so on, which is unheard of in conventional industry in India. So there's no question about that. We need the jobs, we need jobs for our people, we need to do it. But we also need to realize that over time, we need to be a country that holds the intellectual property related to many of these. And that comes primarily from design. Not just design, but from design. I mean, to sort of take that example a little further, practically all the major fabless chip manufacturers, semiconductor chip manufacturers, get their products designed in India, most probably in a radius of about 25 kilometers in Bangalore, right? There are possibly about 20,000 to 30,000 chip designers who are based out of India. In spite of having the designers, we still don't necessarily have the intellectual property related to that. So the design is important, but it needs to be Indian in thought. It needs to be done in a way that the country gets the largest possible benefit out of it. So that is a very, very utilitarian way of looking at it. I must confess, I'm not a creative person. I tend to think in a very utilitarian, way, but I think for the country, it's something which is extremely important. Equally, the acceptance of products and the use of products, in order for it to widen, also depends fundamentally on design. You know, we have excellent technical work. We have many of the electronics components that need to get made. All of those get made in India. There are many of our labs. There are many institutions that even the government of India has sponsored, including the Center for Materials for Electronic Technology, CMET, CDAC, the Center for Development of Advanced Computing. Many of these institutions design, or rather more than design, I would say, are able to research and bring in electronic products of a high order, which sort of replicate whatever is the nature of performance globally. But when you finally see the output, and when you finally look at it and say, okay, what does it look like? It just doesn't have the kind of elements, the sheer attractiveness of a product which you would instinctively want to pick up and buy. That is where I think the design community can really link up with the community which makes a lot of electronics products to make sure that we can in-source a lot of these in India. Again, it means more jobs, it means many other things, but I think it's important that we recognize that it's not just making a product for utility, but to make it really usable, to make it aesthetically appealing, to make it attractive, to make sure that it is something that people go to instinctively is something that electronics products in India currently have not yet address that issue adequately, and that's clearly a space where the design community can come in and help. And that's going to be extremely important from the way that we approach this entire question to see